KPBS On Demand is supported by Splatero, helping homeowners pay off debt by offering streamlined access to your home's equity with no additional monthly payments or new debt. Splatero provides a lump sum payment in exchange for a share of your home's future value. Pre-qualification is available at splatero.com.
I can't hear you. Press the button, you donut.
Beth Accomando, can you hear me?
Yeah, obviously, if you press the button.
This is Beth Accomando.
What do you want?
Well, I want to interview Stephen Toast. I mean, Dr. Lucien Sanchez. No, wait, that's Todd Rivers. Oh, and Douglas Reynholm. And of course, Laszlo Cravensworth. But wait, all of those people have been brought to life by the phenomenally talented Matt Berry. So I want to talk to him.
Oh, I'm honored. Thank you very much.
That's right. Actor, writer, and composer Matt Berry will be my guest today. But fair warning, this podcast contains Matt Berry, which means it contains strong language and adult humor. So you've been warned. Welcome back to another episode of listener-supported KPBS Cinema Junkie podcast. I'm Beth Accomando.
Yeah, I know who you are.
And that is actor Matt Berry as Stephen Toast in the Channel 4 comedy Toast of London, which won him the BAFTA Award for Best Male Performance in a Comedy Program. But people might be more familiar with him as the Staten Island vampire Laszlo in the FX Network's show What We Do in the Shadows.
After all that nonsense on Staten Island, I cut loose to Pennsylvania because it sounded like Transylvania. We all know that sounds cool.
And Berry is cool. I first became aware of him in the wacky and brilliant Garth Marenghi's Darkplace, an absurd spoof of General Hospital-style soap opera, only this one involves a lot of action, violence, and yes, even song.
I put some sounds on. There's a bad atmosphere in here.
Why won't she be mine? I wish I was more attractive like Douglas. Still, one can only dream.
I'm a one-track lover, down a two-way lane, driving fast down the highway, must have been insane, 'cause the temperature's too high, traveling way too fast, and I knew our loving was too hot to last.
Oh, and did I mention Berry is also a singer, musician, and composer. He created the opening theme for the 2006 comic miniseries Snuff Box, in which he played a hangman.
I can't be in love if it's plastic. To live on my own just seems tragic. But we'll raise our souls high when our day comes. You thought it was gold, but it was bronze. So get here in time when our day comes. You thought it was gold, but it was bronze. Get here in time.
American audiences might have first become aware of him for his role in the IT crowd as the buffoonish boss who's always on the make, Douglas Reynholm.
Hey, why are you taking your clothes off?
What?
Come on, we both knew it was on the cards as soon as I realized you were a woman.
What if someone were to walk in?
I left strict instructions not to be disturbed in case we had sex.
But I digress. The main reason for speaking to Berry now is that What We Do in the Shadows wraps its second bloody amazing season on June 10th. The show was a spin-off of the mockumentary feature of the same name created by Jermaine Clement and Taika Waititi in 2014. The film focused on a group of Wellington vampire roommates coping with everything from pesky local werewolves to how to dress when you have no reflection to who does the dishes. For the TV show, the setting was moved to New York and a new set of characters were created, with Berry playing Laszlo Cravensworth. I need to take one quick break, and then I'll be back with my interview with the multi-talented Matt Berry.
KPBS On Demand is supported by Splatero, helping homeowners pay off debt by offering streamlined access to your home's equity with no additional monthly payments or new debt. Splatero provides a lump sum payment in exchange for a share of your home's future value. Pre-qualification is available at splatero.com.
So, Matt, you are heading into the season finale for What We Do in the Shadows.
Apparently so.
How does it feel to be entering the end of this second season?
I suppose it's worth remembering that it hasn't aired in the UK, so it doesn't feel like anything because I haven't seen any of it and I can't watch it go out. So I've no idea. To answer your question truthfully, yeah, I mean, as long as everybody, you know, has enjoyed it over where you are, then I've done my job, I guess.
So how did you initially get involved with the series?
I got involved. I was doing a film about 3 or 4 years ago with Jermaine, and halfway through that film, he just leant over and said, "Look, I'm thinking about doing a TV version of that vampire film that I did." And I was like, "All right." And he said, "Would you want to do it?" So I said, "Yeah. I mean, would it mean working with you?" And he goes, "Yeah." So I said, "Well, yeah, that's it. That's how I got, that's how I got involved. It's no amazing showbiz story or anything other than that." I mean, he just asked me, while we were doing something else, and I obviously said yes, because that had been the first time that I'd worked with him. I'd always wanted to work with him and Taika, but we worked together on that film. So, the chance of kind of, sort of working together again, and he initiated it, of course I'd say yes.
So since you got involved so early on that show, how much involvement did you have in creating Laszlo and who he is and what kind of a person he is?
Well, there wasn't much conversation had. I mean, the only thing I can kind of remember is I said to Jermaine, before we'd filmed anything, before we did the pilot, how do you want this fella to sound? And he said, I want him to sound like you. And I said, well, if he's Eastern Europe, or everyone else is doing that, then I can do that. And he was dead against that. He said, no. I want him to sound, like you sound. So that was it. That was the only conversation that we really, had. And then I just, sort of turned up on the first day of the pilot and went for it.
Now, the show has a very kind of free-form feel to it because of that mockumentary style. But how tightly scripted is it, and how much interplay is there in terms of like you guys improvising or changing things as you're shooting?
It's very loose. It's a basic starting point, and then we kind of shoot from there. So no one is particularly precious about the script, unless there's a line that is going to be kind of relevant for a visual joke or something, a couple of scenes sort of later on, then you have to make sure that you get that right. But other than that, it's very, very loose. I mean, there's a lot of sort of British references that I always think, they're going to cut out. And I just kind of put them in, just to sort of test the water, as it were. Sometimes, they're left in, from what I would imagine, to the confusion of most people. But yeah, no, it's a very good atmosphere because, you are kind of left to sort of try things out, and see what works and what doesn't work.
If you didn't have a lot of background on Laszlo when this series started, what kind of a backstory did you create for him?
He's unwittingly become sort of part of this scene, part of this way of life, I guess. I mean, he was just like a normal pompous idiot who just so happened to have a vampire fly outside his window. She materialized, into a sort of beautiful young woman, and that was it. Then he was a vampire, but he's no different than he was the day before he was a vampire. So, he's still the same conceited idiot that he always was.
I infiltrated the township posing as your average American Yankee Doodle dandy, and I took over Lucky Brew's Bar and Grill.
The previous owner, he mysteriously disappeared because I killed him. Drinks on the house. And I've not looked back since. I now go by the name of Daytona, Jackie Daytona. And I'll tell you something, Jackie Daytona's life, it ain't so bad. Not bad at all.
And do you find any kind of through line between some of the other characters you've created and Laszlo now?
I guess, I mean, the most fun is, when you play somebody who has no sense of humor and has no sense of themselves in that way and doesn't really care, what other people think. I mean, I didn't intend for him to be like that, but it's the way, that it was kind of written. So I just went with that. If he'd have been some kind of quiet, like sort of henpecked character, I'd have done that, with just as much enthusiasm, but the way that he was written was he sounded like he was quite sort of keen on the sound of his own voice. So I had to go with that.
Well, and you do have this great voice, and some of your inflections just make a very simple, plain line so much funnier. I mean, just the way you say New York City.
Well, that's just to keep you concentrating. Otherwise, you might drift off and think about Selling Sunset or one of those other shows that are on. I don't know why I mentioned that one. I've just seen a picture for it, maybe. Yeah. I've got to keep you in one place, and that's just one way of doing it. I can't have you turning over halfway through and watching Selling Sunset. I won't be doing my job if that happens.
I don't see how anyone could turn away from What We Do in the Shadows. That show is giving me such joy in quarantine. I can just
Oh, that's good. Thank you.
Now, when you do the scenes where they're the sit-down interview parts of the show, how are those to shoot? And are you just completely kind of improvising to questions that are being thrown at you?
Yeah, they are completely improvised, I would say. I mean, if they're plot driven, then you got to make sure, you sort of mention the 2 or 3 words that, that are kind of relevant. But other than that, you can say any old nonsense because they can just cut it down. We get quite a lot of time to do those, which is good. Gives us the time to say anything, and we really do say anything on those. The most horrendous things sometimes, and thank God they're not included. But in order to say those horrendous things, you get to something else. So sometimes it's worth it, if that makes any sense.
Yes. And what is it like shooting on the set? Because it seems like as characters, you guys have this ensemble. I mean, you guys are living together for centuries. What kind of a feel is there on the set? And have you guys kind of developed this sense of camaraderie on the set?
We all love the set. I mean, the set is the best set that I've ever worked on. I mean, I've worked on a lot of sitcoms where the sets are sort of pony. They're just normally a bunch of flats with office furniture. But this is fantastic because everywhere you look, a 360 affair. So, I mean, you can go back to your trailer, to sort of rest in between scenes. Now, I don't do that as a rule because the set is far more comfortable. So I'll go and pick a room that isn't being used for filming, and I'll go and sleep there for an hour or 2 because it's much more comfortable. It does freak you out when you wake up, though, because you wake up and think, what the hell? It's a bit of a shock because there'll be a portrait of you or a skeleton or something, horrendous. But they're far more comfortable than any of the trailers.
One of the things that I really appreciate about the show is the particular kind of humor there is, because it constantly surprises you because you think you kind of have the characters figured out to a certain degree. And then, like in the ghost episode, suddenly here are these vampires who don't believe in ghosts. And that was such a nice kind of turn.
Right.
And I'm just wondering, what kind of things is Jermaine Clement drawing on in terms of coming up with these storylines?
No, but I think, we sort of touched upon that in the first series too. It's just, it's just that thing which is always really interesting and can be quite funny, where you have a figure or, a certain kind of creature, be it vampire or like zombie. But then you think, what scares them? They're very famous for, sort of scaring everything else. But then, what would scare them? And the more stupid and, sort of trivial or almost childish thing that scares them is always going to be quite interesting, and could be funny.
Now, I am led to believe that your presence here indicates some kind of unfinished business on this terrestrial plane.
Indeed so.
Sorry about that, old chap. Anything I can help with?
Well, actually, yes, I believe you can.
You remember the night you officially died, I presume? No, I remember it well. My lovely Naja came in through the window, took my life, thus making me the vampire you see before you now. A damn handsome one at that, I might say. You're too kind. Now, you remember the precise moment Naja took our life. I was on the verge of a sexual climax. Well, here's the thing. I was on the verge of fulfillment, yet I couldn't quite finish. Ah, I see. You want to finish your final human orgasm. Yes. I've tried to finish myself off with these hands, but they're ghost hands. They don't have the necessary stimulus. How irritating. Yeah, whereas your meat hands, I'm convinced, would give me the traction for full sexual release.
And I do have to ask you about the episode you did with Mark Hamill, because you got kind of featured in that one, and that was a great piece. What was that one like to shoot?
It was a lot of fun. Stephanie Robinson wrote that, and she's great. And it was just weird because there was a scene where we were fighting each other with pool cues, and we had to hold the pool cues in front of us, and I just thought, here I am. I'm stood in front of Luke Skywalker holding a pool cue. I mean, yeah, it's just, there aren't that many moments, that take you out of what you're doing where you think, how the hell have I ended up here doing this? I mean, I think that quite a lot, which is, how the hell have I ended up here? Why the hell have they hired me? That is something I often say to myself, but you can't, you won't know that I've just said that because it's in my head, obviously. But, yeah, I mean, that was one of those rare occasions, where I just sort of caught myself and thought, this is insane. I'm here with Mark Hamill and we're fighting with sticks. It was great. I mean, I was very lucky to sort of be featured in an episode and, even more lucky to be featured in an episode with Mark Hamill.
And what do you think it is about the show that's really striking a chord with people? Because people really love this show.
I've no idea. And again, it's worth remembering that in the UK, it doesn't really have any kind of presence. So I don't know that it's doing well over there because ever since it's been on, I've been over here. So it hasn't made any difference to me, so personally, because I haven't seen any kind of reaction to the show. I don't really look at social media and pay much attention to anything like that. So, I haven't really noticed, to be honest.
Well, you mentioned, how did you get here from where you were? And I want to remind people about some of the other shows you've worked on, because I think the first show I saw you in was Garth Marenghi's Darkplace.
Dead Dag, we're too late. Looks like our man struck again.
Negative, Sanch. This ain't a fresh kill. In fact, it don't look like a kill at all. Guy probably came down, got lost, went mad, ate his hands, and died right here. Come on. There's nothing we can do for him now. Keep close. These tunnels are really long and curvy.
And that show was brilliant, but it was, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about kind of the way that show kind of played with TV tropes and had so much fun with even something as simple as just like ambience cutting from scene to scene.
The aim there was to do something where if Brits had tried to make an American action type show, using sort of British actors and the British sensibilities, and the British way of doing things, yet try to make it look like, it was the A-Team or something. And that's what you got. You got something that you thought you had a handle on, yet you didn't. And it was terrible.
Yeah, it's me, Dag. I'm in a dead end. I've been cornered by some cutlery. I think I can take them. A whisk, a tin opener, and a spatula. Yeah, I'll take the whisk out first and hold them off as long as I can. Ah! I'm hit, I'm down. Yeah, got me in the leg. They'll be after you next. Bye.
But, you couldn't take your eyes off it. I mean, I remember my cousin, this is going back years. He was really young when that first went out. And I remember he phoned me and said, look, I saw that thing that you did last night, man, that's terrible. What the hell was that? And I had to sort of explain there that it was kind of meant to be bad. I hadn't foolishly joined a terrible show. The point was, it was supposed to look half-assed and the rest of it. And I just love the fact that he took pity on me and thought, I'd made a huge mistake by being in this show.
Well, and you describe it as an action show, but it's like General Hospital as an action show.
Yeah, so it's that. So it's doctors who pull guns on one another, which I always thought was a great idea. The fact that, you're a doctor, you're working, in a hospital, but something intense happens over there, so you pull your gun. I'd never seen that before, and was fully in favor of something as stupid as that.
And of course, I love every time you cut to the exterior of the hospital, it's like a kind of a cardboard
shitty model. Yeah.
Model.
Yeah.
Anyway, that show gave me a lot of joy.
Thank you.
And the attention to detail in terms of like capturing this particular style was wonderful.
Well, it's funny you should mention it, because when we filmed the second series of What We Do in the Shadows, we're in Canada when we filmed that. And the first week of shooting, in one of the cinemas in Toronto, was doing a Garth Marenghi sort of marathon night where they'd show every episode, then. And it's just pure coincidence that I was there for the first week of filming. So Stephanie Robinson, who writes the show, she also found out and was like, "You've got to go down. You've got to go and say, sort of say hello." And to be honest, I wasn't keen. It's like, I never think, you should turn up to something that you've not been asked to. I firmly believe that. But she said, no, it would be great if you did. You should definitely go. So she dragged me. We went in there, and this massive cinema was packed with people dressed in the costumes, that we wore 20 years ago, whenever it was that we made that. Yeah, then I went on stage, and sort of, and I digress, but it was, it was serendipitous.
Now, you've also written shows, and I think one of your first ones was Snuff Box that you starred in and also wrote.
That's true.
How could you read out my diary and let all these men laugh at me? Oh, I'm so sick and tired of your bullshit. You've run out of gas in your cockpit, and after all that I have done for you, I gave you a home food booze too, and this is how you betray me. You sit there and read out my diary.
Talk a little bit about that show, because in a certain sense, like the style of comedy in that is radically different from What We Do in the Shadows. There's kind of it's almost like you break off into sketches, and you even got to compose on that one too.
Well, I mean, I've composed on What We Do in the Shadows. I don't know whether that episode has gone out yet. Yeah, I mean, it was an experiment, and I was very lucky to be able to do what I did. I mean, whether I do that again now, probably not. But I was a lot younger, and you've got to sort of try these things out. And I wasn't pulled off the air. I was convinced that I would be. I was thinking, there's no one's going to want to see this. But they went with it. They didn't give us a second series, which I wasn't at all surprised by. But it was good, because it was. I learned how sort of television works. When you write your own thing that's going to be made on TV, you have to then become, sort of savvy in all sorts of things, the technical side of things. And it was a good lesson for me for when I did Toast. Yeah, so I'm very sort of thankful of the opportunity that I had with that show.
Well, in Toast of London, you also get to have a lot of fun with vocal work.
Yeah.
Because you play someone who's he seems to be constantly in a sound booth.
Yeah, he's a voiceover artist, yeah.
Periscope. Down Periscope.
Hi, Stephen. This is Clem Fandango.
What, the work experience, boy?
Yeah, can you hear me, Stephen?
Yeah, I can hear you, Clem Fandango. Where's that other prick?
Danny. He's DJing at a music festival this weekend.
Yeah, just to be clear, so these will be heard on every submarine in the Royal Navy?
Yeah, they're just automating and digitizing everything. The commander presses a button and the recording of your voice will be heard immediately.
Yeah, I'm not interested in all that. Can we just crack on?
Fire the nuclear weapons!
Stephen, that was good. But you think you could give it another try, this time say it in a less alarming way?
Less alarming? I've just given the order to fire the nuclear weapons. I've just unleashed Armageddon.
Yes, but the feeling here is that you could do it in a way which is a little less dramatic. It's just a little bit over the top at the moment. Have fun with it.
Fire the nuclear weapons.
That was a little bit too far the other way, a bit too jolly. Yeah, when you just try a few more times.
Fire the nuclear weapons. 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 Yeah.
So, as you're heading into the end of this season of What We Do in the Shadows, what have you liked most about playing Laszlo?
I like working with Natasha. That's my, one of my main highlights. That's great because we got almost identical sense of humour. So, and that really helps.
My Laszlo has always been quite musical.
It's true, I can play anything. I don't give a monkeys. Whether it's a three-way plunk box, Antoine Sax's metallic clarinet, or the Chin Grinder's wind piano. But I'll tell you this, my luck changed the night I met Nadia. For she is an exquisite lyricist.
Guilty, Your Honour. Send me down.
See?
That's why I love this one. Shall we do it?
Whatever happened to sweet Daisy Lou?
Her hoop skirt was a poop skirt when she couldn't find the loo.
It's just made so much easier for me being in such an amazing set, everybody kind of concentrating as hard as they can, because that really brings out everyone to, sort of fizz off each other and do what you need to do. Yeah, it's just a good environment. I mean, it's a good environment for me personally. I can't speak for anyone else. I mean, I don't know how they find, but it's good for me. It's inspiring. And if something, if there's that amount of attention to detail that's gone into everything that, that you look at around you, then you have to match that, I think. You have to be as good as all this. So it does, it kind of makes you raise your game, which is always worth doing.
And the show's been renewed for another season. Do you have any kind of hopes for where Laszlo might go or something that he might get to do?
No, I mean, that's none of my business. It's not my show. I mean, if they, it's up to them to do whatever they want to do with it, or that character. It wouldn't be, for me to say what should happen to him, or what he could do or whatever. I'm just there to do the job. I'm sort of happy to help.
And you said you got to do some composing for the show.
Yeah, there's one, I think it went out last night or the night before, whatever night it goes out over there. The story being that all these now famous songs, I reckon I composed like hundreds of years ago.
Hi.
What do you want?
That sounded great. Have you ever thought of maybe performing live, kind of a 300 years of great music?
But no one has even heard most of these songs. Witches Are Snitches, Poster on Carriage Full of Arse, Wannabe.
If you want, I can put out some feelers.
Well, if you can sort out a concert, we might turn up.
I'll see what I can do, Daddy-o.
Rock on.
So I had to write a load of songs that we performed in this club. I don't know how much of them ended up in the final thing, but I wrote, a load of short songs for this episode. And there's this music room, this extra room in the house that we see for the first time. And there was some piano things that I had to write for that. So, but it's difficult to say because I don't know whether any of that was, kind of left in or edited out.
So when you see the final show, it's kind of a surprise for you as to what actually ends up in there.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's difficult for me to see because I don't have FX or anything. I don't have those streaming things. It's mostly, I mean, but the thing is, it doesn't really matter what I think. I mean, if everybody else liked it, and the people that wrote it and kind of made it and who are in charge, if they're all happy, then I'm happy. I don't really need to, it doesn't matter what I think.
And the fact that you've composed on some of these shows, you actually have a band and have put out records too, correct? Or out? We don't do records anymore. I'm old. I'm sorry.
Well, no, we do records. Yeah, I've just sent something off now to be vinyled. Yeah, I mean, I was doing that before doing this stuff. So whenever, I'm asked to kind of talk about it, it's not, it was just, it was something, that I've always done. And I happened to kind of drift into this. Yeah, I mean, it just seems perfectly natural. It's this that was, that I didn't expect, if that makes any sense.
So how did you get into this?
I just drifted. I was playing some songs before a comedy act in London, and I'd done it for a couple of weeks, and then kind of realised that doing straight songs, before a sort of comedy thing probably wasn't such a great idea. It might be worth, making some of these songs sort of funny, or just doing something with them, that was kind of different. So I did that. And that's what led to me being spotted by Matt and Richard. And then I did Garth, Darkplace. And then that led to the IT Crowd, which then led to Toast. It's just luck, pure luck.
Well,
the luckiest man in London.
But you have the talent to make it all work.
Yeah.
So were you originally interested in a music career then?
Well, I would have been happy just to have worked in the arts. That was my goal. Whether that was painting or making music, either of those would have been fine by me. I mean, I love music. I suppose is my main passion, and it's what I think about. I would have just been happy just to have worked in the arts, and not done a normal, like a job that I wasn't interested in, I suppose.
All right. Well, I want to thank you very much for taking some time to talk to me. And I am looking so forward to the season finale, although I'll be sad for the show to go away for a while.
Well, thank you very much indeed. Nice to have talked to you.
And can I ask you, during the podcast, is it okay to play any clips from your music at all?
Please do. Go ahead.
That's the title track of Matt Berry's Night Terrors album that came out in 2017. I've been thrilled to speak with actor, writer, and composer Matt Berry, and deeply regret that I did not ask him to say, "Yes, I can hear you, Beth Accomando," in that glorious voice of his. But you can catch him in the season finale of What We Do in the Shadows on June 10th. All the clips I used here in the podcast were courtesy of the FX networks. You can find Berry's music on his website, themattberry.co.uk, or on Spotify. And since Berry was kind enough to let me play some of his music, here's a cut that boasts my favorite title, From the Manger to the Mortuary, from his Witch Hazel album. Hope this inspires you to seek out more of his music and more of his shows. So till our next Film Fix, I'm Beth Accomando, your resident cinema junkie.
KPBS On Demand is supported by Latino Legacy Foundation, presenting their Storyteller series, Reach for the Stars with Ellen Ochoa, the first Latina astronaut, former NASA director, and San Diego native, Sunday, June 29th. More at LatinoLegacyFoundation.org.